Every word has come back to haunt me. That's how one Chinese Danmei writer described the moment her world fell apart. Her phone lit up with messages. Another author had just been arrested for writing gay fiction. The charges? Distributing pornographic materials. Her crime? Publishing BL erotica online. Stories about fictional men and fictional relationships. This wasn't some niche forum crackdown. It was a full-scale campaign. Writers were interrogated. Online platforms were wiped clean. Whole communities, mostly women, vanished overnight. But this isn't a new story. It's just the latest chapter in a long war over gender, desire, and state control in China. So what's really going on here? Why are women being arrested for writing about men loving men? How did we go from fandom to felony? And what does it mean when stories, especially queer ones, become crimes? Let's pause and take a closer look. The arrests of Chinese Danmei writers have been building for years. Censorship of queer fiction, especially explicit content, has long been a quiet constant online. But something shifted in recent years. While Danmei platforms have faced censorship since the early 2000s, actual arrests and criminal charges began to spike in the last decade. A turning point came in 2018, when a writer known as Tian Yi was sentenced to over 10 years in prison for selling BL novels featuring explicit content and BDSM. That case shocked fans globally and warned writers that the line between fiction and crime was narrowing fast. Fast forward to 2024 to 2025, and we're seeing a renewed, intensified crackdown. Multiple Danmei authors have reportedly been detained or charged, not just for selling their work, but for simply writing it online. Social media reports from platforms like Xiaohongshu and Weibo suggest that writers are being monitored, summoned for questioning, and in some cases, having their homes searched. One woman shared that authorities confronted her with specific sentences from her own fiction. She said she wanted to die on the spot. These cases are often quiet, difficult to verify, and deliberately underreported in mainstream Chinese media, which makes the fear even more pervasive. And many of these writers? They're not anonymous adult producers of commercial porn. Most are women, and while many are adults today, some began writing Danmei when they were as young as 11. Take the authors behind the popular ABO Desire series, for instance. While there's no confirmed age for when they wrote the series itself, reports say they began writing as young as 14. Stories like theirs, and many others in the Danmei space, often gain traction on self-publishing platforms like JJWXC and Lofter. But once these works are flagged by algorithms or reported by anonymous users, it doesn't matter if the writer is young, anonymous, or writing purely for fun. You're still producing illegal content. The message is chillingly clear. Your fantasy can get you arrested. On the surface, this might seem like a moral panic about pornography. But Danmei, and especially its younger female fan base, sits at the intersection of multiple anxieties in China today. First, there's the government's long-standing discomfort with LGBTQ+ themes, particularly when they challenge traditional gender roles. Officially, homosexuality is not illegal in China, but queer content is often censored under vague guidelines banning abnormal sexual relationships or immorality. These censorship laws are intentionally broad and vague, making enforcement unpredictable and sweeping. Danmei, which often centers gay love stories with emotionally intense or erotic tones, pushes directly against that. Second, many of these stories are written by women, for women. They reimagine masculinity, explore alternative gender roles, and often bypass traditional marriage narratives altogether. That threatens a deeply patriarchal order, one that already sees declining birth rates, rising divorce rates, and an entire generation of women who are less willing to conform. Third, and most directly, there's the label of vulgar and obscene content. Danmei is often treated as porn by default, regardless of context or artistic value. But what counts as porn in China can be as simple as emotional intimacy between men, or even suggestive language. The line is so vague that almost any story can be twisted into evidence of corruption, especially when written by women about gay men. This makes Danmei an easy scapegoat. It's queer, it's female-led, it's popular, and it doesn't fit the state's vision of a healthy culture. This crackdown isn't just about the law. It's about who gets to imagine what, and what kind of desire is allowed to exist. Danmei, like slash fiction in the West, is often dismissed as cringe or perverse, especially when written by women. But at its core, it's about exploration, desire, power, sometimes pain, often love. It's a space where women, especially young women, can play with ideas outside of heteronormative constraints. And that's exactly why it's targeted. China's government has expressed concern about the feminization of boys, the dangers of sissy idols, and the influence of fandom culture. Danmei becomes a threat not because it's explicit, but because it empowers the wrong people. Teenage girls imagining gay male love? That's two kinds of deviance from their point of view. It's also why the penalties are so disproportionate. You're not just writing inappropriate fiction, you're defying state power by creating worlds they can't control. One of the scariest parts of this wave isn't just the arrests, it's the silence that follows. Once writers are arrested, platforms vanish. Fan forums go dark, accounts are deleted or self-censored. Even discussions of the crackdown are filtered out by Chinese social media, leaving fans with whispers and rumors, but no confirmation. You don't know who's safe, who's next, or what line was actually crossed. This erodes trust. Writers disappear without warning, communities break apart, and fans, especially young ones, internalize the fear. Better not to write at all. International fans might still consume sanitized, state-approved Danmei adaptations like The Untamed or Word of Honor, but the raw, queer, female-driven creativity behind those works? It's being wiped out at the source. And while China's crackdown is the most severe, BL creators in places like South Korea or Japan face their own forms of pressure too, from conservative backlash to commercial censorship. It's striking how globally successful shows like The Untamed became, despite increasing domestic censorship. Once the foundation of a billion-yuan IP industry, Danmei's rise and fall raises questions about how culture, control, and commerce collide in China. The arrest of Danmei writers isn't just a censorship story. It's a story about gender, about power, about imagination, and about fear. The fear of what happens when people, especially young women, start writing worlds the state can't control. But those stories don't vanish. They travel, they inspire, and they remind us that even in silence, creativity resists. I hope this pause in the chaos gave you something to think about. Until next time, this is GPkP.